Chapter 18. Fireworks. To fight for peace, that kind of courage requires a specific type of person. You are not that person, I am that person, and I hate it. Let me tell you something, if you want to truly fight for peace, and if you want to be that kind of person, I'll tell you how. You have to kill yourself, again and again and again, until what's left of your humanity is dead, and you become nothing more than a murderer. You'll bear the burden of all the hate and discourse of the world, but you'll save the world from itself. Can you bear that burden? I thought I could. No one can. Samantha previously arranged for everyone to be at Kendall Square at 4 o'clock p.m. sharp and a little earlier. That would give her enough time to track Ted down in case he bailed again. She looked carefully at her watch as Michael, Tim, Erin and Jennifer were sitting down on some of the benches. Jennifer peered diligently down the stairs of the subway station. There were droves of people coming up and going down the red signs reading Kendall Square. Samantha and her friends were shaded by numerous trees and banners hanging on the side of the shops and restaurants. These were brick buildings. Jennifer's fingers interlaced with one another on both hands. One hand squeezed the other tightly, while the other fingers rested over each other. She had a white visor which covered her face in shadows, mixed with khaki shorts and a black shirt. Samantha walked over to her as she was alone, isolated by herself, clearly bored of all the finance talk. Obviously, Michael led most of that conversation, with his confident demeanour, owning that salmon-coloured shirt that less secure men would not wear. "So, what are you feeling right now?" Sam asked Jennifer, sitting down next to her, wrapping her arm around her shoulder. "Well, I suppose I'm feeling overjoyed that I might see him again. Thank you, Sam," she said cheerfully. Sam felt relieved Jennifer returned to her usual upbeat self. "And I'll be relieved if he doesn't show up. I'm satisfied either way. Of course, I'd like to see him again, but I will no longer force his friendship with ours. It is... Sometimes we need a friend to be an enemy," Sam said, looking up at the sky, looking for an answer and something genuine to say. "Only a true friend will insult us to our face. Only a true friend will call us out on all our shit." "Sam," Tim called out. "Language." "Sorry, Tim," Sam called back, but she was grateful for him holding her accountable. "Look, I can't say what I heard on that night when I forced him to come." She glanced down at her watch, 3:57 p.m. "But I know what he needs. He doesn't need that soft and passive friend. He needs a stern but active friend. I didn't know that was something I could be, but I think we all need to be part of that. We all need to be active, or else we'll all lose him. There are times when we need a stern hand. There are times where we need a motherly caring hand and the occasional whip up the butt with a wooden spoon." Jennifer chuckled. She took enough beatings with that wooden spoon before. "I read something before, once, many years ago at my undergrad, that a man who grew up in a violent household responds best to order and direction. Such a man is responsive to those who lead them, for fear of being punished. Such a man doesn't respond well to a passive friend because they can't offer that guidance." "You have no idea how right you are," Sam commented, looking back at her watch. 4:02 p.m. "Can you call Ted? Ask him where he is, please, else I'm driving to pick him up." Jennifer took out her phone. She hesitated before forcing her thumb violently down on the touchscreen. She brought the phone to her ear, listening to the dial tone. "Why don't you put that on speaker?" Sam asked, eager to hear the tone of his voice. Jennifer nodded and placed her phone on speaker and held it away from her ear. Her free elbow propped her head up by the thigh, tilting her head, and her hair dropped down to the side. The phone rang 3 times. "Hello?" came that familiar, smooth voice. "Tedward!" she cried out, her face lit up with excitement. "It's me, Jennifer!" "Oh, I know," he chuckled softly into the phone. "I have your number in my phone, remember?" "It's good to hear from you again. Are you coming? Where are you?" "Oh, you know, around," he joked. It was a very corny joke. "You've certainly got that Boston sarcasm," she jested. "Oh, please, Bostonians do it better. Don't threaten me with a good time." "Jennifer, I would never." "So, where are you?" "I told you, I'm not threatening you with a good time." "Tedward!" "Open your eyes." Jennifer was looking at an empty subway station. She blinked repeatedly, and took one hand to wipe away any sleep from her eyes. "What am I supposed to be looking at?" "An empty subway station." "What?" She turned her head around and found Ted standing on the other side of the street, right in front of the Merlion building on 1 Broadway. He waved and bore that smile. "Tedward, what are you doing? Get over here!" Jennifer found herself yelling at him from across the street, but it was apparent her voice carried over his phone as he pushed his phone away from his face. "Well, that's a relief," Sam said, and took a deep breath as she turned her head towards him. He was wearing his fatigues, wrinkled, and khakis. His hair was still a scruffy mess. Now I don't have to go chasing him down. She felt a major burden being lifted from her chest. She smiled as Jennifer met Ted at the crosswalk. Thank you. She went over to Erin and pushed her to the side of the bench and wrapped her hand around her waist. So, what do you think? I didn't take you to be much of a matchmaker. I mean, how long did it take for Michael to give you the slip? She chuckled, elbowing her in the side. Sam looked at her awkwardly. Jennifer would have said it better. Michael laughed. Shh, shh, shh. Tim put his finger to his lips. You don't want her hearing that. Last time someone made that assumption. He shuddered. So many accidents. That was completely unrelated. The pipe in the room burst, Samantha teased, chuckling. Yeah, it didn't help we were on the top floor. Michael scratched his chin as he tilted his gaze skywards. Oh well, not like she caused it. So where's this canoe place? Erin asked. Oh well, I suppose I know him a little better, but even I have my hesitations. They seem a good match. Way to be an Emma. Oh please, I get enough of that from Jennifer. I don't need that from you, Erin, Samantha scowled at her. I'm not a fan of Jane Austen personally. Before you go off on some unnecessary tangent that is likely to make us late, Michael began. You're one to talk, Sam replied sarcastically. For the record, I came early today. Michael shook his head as he pointed an index finger at her chest. It's about a 15-minute walk. Michael, I'm sure we'll be fine. We originally planned to be here at 6 o'clock p.m. in case something happened. Ted happened, and he was on time. Contrary to popular belief, it was either on time or not at all. We have plenty of time. Fireworks don't start until later. Which reminds me, food. Sam rebutted. I'll go grab something. Anything in particular we want? He asked. Didn't we plan this? Forget it. Go to the store, get some snacks, soda, and anything else you can think of. Fortunately, some of us had a late lunch. Sam pointed at herself. Come on, Tim. Michael grabbed Tim as they went along the opposite side of the street to a nearby convenience store. So, you finally came on time, or even at all, Jennifer said, smiling up to Ted. Jennifer relaxed to the lovely melody of walking and chattering noises. The background noise was like music to her ears, reminding of her violin-playing days. She felt the warm array beat on her skin. She saw cars driving by, merging onto different lanes on this busy street, and some honking because some inconsiderate tourist cut off a driver. She shook her head. Whoever that tourist was clearly ignored the no turn on red sign. What changed? I didn't think I'd see you today, or at all ever again. I hope my sudden surprise was welcome. He smiled. But this smile wasn't as wide as all the other smiles he gave her. There was something different about it, but Jennifer couldn't quite place it. It most certainly is, she smirked, her eyelids dropping a bit like she was planning something. Honestly, though, I was going to be content whatever happened. Although I would say I wouldn't have liked to have not seen you again. I don't think my sensitive little eyes could take any more of that. And don't dodge my question, you sly fox, you. I wasn't planning on it. He let out a small laugh that came out more like a cough. I know something's changed. I haven't quite determined what yet. So, are you going to tell me something pleasant about you? Unlike that dreary excuse of an explanation the last time I saw you, she asked. I think I will save that for tonight. I have to think of something that you don't know about me that is pleasant, he answered. Jennifer could tell his smile lessened about a few centimetres. She found herself relieved that, to her, he couldn't maintain that facade, or perhaps was willing to trust her of all people with something precious. It is hard for me to find something pleasant. Then think on it, but don't filter yourself, Tedward. If you must, give me something precious, and I'll give you something precious. She poked him. He paused, rubbing his chin. I don't think any of that came from a Jane Austen novel. Nope, she cackled, pulling her head back and let her hair fall. I came up with that cheesy line myself, or if it was pulled from some fake crap romantic novel with unrealistic expectations, this was purely coincidental. I see. It seemed a little dry for Jane Austen. I'm not Jane Austen, she defended herself. Ted went with all of them to the rental, renting 3 canoes. Of course, they didn't originally plan on filling all the canoes with passengers. This was something Ted picked up on. One of the canoes was meant to be for storage for food and snacks while they were out at sea. I still think a whole canoe is too much space for this, Erin said as they tied the canoes together with bungee cords. I think 2 was enough. Well, Samantha said, putting some bags of snacks into the canoe she and Michael shared. We did think Brian was coming. He flaked last minute. Typical Brian, he's probably with you-know-who, Jennifer quipped, loading the canoe she and Ted would share. Let us be off. Very important business. Ted watched Jennifer as she stumbled into the canoe. Ted and Michael pushed the canoe out from the shore and hopped in. Tim and Erin helped balance the sudden weight in the additional canoes to prevent them from tipping. All of them rowed out and waited for the sun to set. The skies were clear, and the sun was finally setting over the western horizon of Boston, and the darkness was swooping in over the east. The lights were still very much widely used, taking away any lights from the stars from above. All of them were wading in the canoe, and Jennifer and Ted shared one. 10:28, Samantha said. The pop concert should be ending soon. Why did we come out here so early? Tim complained. I have to pee. Bro, Michael laughed, you have a whole ocean. That's not sanitary. What about the fish? I don't think they'd like that. Tim replied. You do realise they pee in the same water they swim in, right? Michael said. He reached out to grab an empty coffee can. He tossed it over to Tim. Use this if you're concerned. My Uncle Jack used to road trip with these things. He'd never stop even to use the bathroom. He just kept driving. Uncle Jack, Tim said. How fitting. Tim swiftly turned around, using the can as his toilet. Ted noted how careful Tim seemed to be with it, trying to hide his private parts from the rest of them. You better dump that out, Tim, Erin exclaimed. If I'm sharing a canoe with you, I don't want to have to smell it the entire time. But, he started to protest. Dang it, just give it to me. She smiled and took the bucket and dumped the urine into the water. She rinsed the bucket out with the same water. There was a loud whistling in the air. They all jerked their heads and pointed at the white shaking stream following the rocket in the air. Sam, Erin and Jennifer leaned back in the canoe and pointed at it. The numerous lights lit up the skies and shimmered in the ripples of the water. These three seemed to Ted to be the most like children, if that is how he would expect children to behave. The first boom of distant tank fire echoed in his ears, the cannon blowing up, overwhelmed by the enormous pressure of the exploding powder, sending flares and flashes of white. The noise sent ripples between the canoes. Ted could feel the weight being shifted in the canoes. Again and again and again, the lights would flash blue, red, green and white lights, sending debris into the ocean. His fists clenched at the sides of the canoe. His eyes flared as the beautiful exploding lights lit up the blackened sky. The loud bangs concussed his skull. He took numerous soft, measured breaths as his hands dug into the side of the canoe. He grinded his teeth as unwanted memories began to assault his mind. Afghanistan, August the 13th, 2012. The air was dry, the moisture was gone, and the sand scorched. Ghost sprinted in the sand with Viper behind him. Ticker was to his left, and Butcher to his left, her katana drawn. Her current height made the katana look like a 5-foot adachi. Their legs sprinted through the sand, through the whistling howls of the tank fire aimed directly at him. Ghost saw. He jumped to the side, and Viper jumped in the other direction, just missing impact. The sand went everywhere, pelting his body like bullets. More shells of tank fire followed. The whistling never stopped, as if the tanks themselves were the form of their hated oppression. Ghost took a good look at the line in front of them. The tanks kept firing, and the buzzing of bullet fire came, obscuring their vision. Ticker, 136 meters! Ghost yelled as 2 bullets grazed his cheeks. He ignored it. Pain was all too familiar for him to bother with it anymore. 1 o'clock! 10-4, Ticker replied. He could hear the rapid sprinting of Ticker, the little soldier sprinting faster and harder. Not more than 15 seconds later did he hear cries and a loud explosion. The sound cleared. Ghost saw the rightmost tank was nearly toppled, but completely ripped to shreds. Afghan soldiers were dying near the tank, with gunfire, explosive debris, or even the flames themselves. Ghost, Butcher and Viper picked up into a full sprint, leaving clouds of sand in their wake. They jumped behind the sandbags. Ticker swiftly blew up another tank. The Afghan soldiers were in complete disarray. It was like they were surprised they stood over 1.5 feet above their enemy. Ghost let his rifle fire. He constantly pulled the single-shot trigger numerous times as he aimed down the iron sights. His gun ripped through the second-rate bulletproof vests the Afghan soldiers were wearing. One of the other men threw his rifle at him. Ghost was briefly distracted as he sidestepped from the man's swing with the scimitar. A second swing was made. Ghost pulled out his knife. He grabbed the man's hand and twisted him down to his height. He thrust his knife into the man's chest, twisting the knife and ripped apart the man's heart. Ghost watched as the man's corpse collapsed to the ground and watered the sand with its blood. More fireworks started firing and whistling in the air. Ted realized he dazed off in an experiential nightmare and attempted to return his smile to his face. He released his grip on the canoe. He stared out at the open sea and the lights of the city. There were many canoes and other boats with people smiling happily at the bright exploding lights. His breaths were still short and measured. He needed to control himself, or something worse will happen than these sudden flashbacks. He bowed his head down. They can't see this. He gasped. His eyes were wide open as he felt something warm touch his hand. His hand started trembling, but was too much afraid to do anything. His gaze suddenly shifted to his hand and found a warm matter of flesh covering his trembling hand. He looked up at the arm from which the warm, gentle hand was attached. He found himself looking into the concerned eyes of Jennifer, who held his hand firmly. "Ted," she whispered, "you don't have to go at it alone. That's what friends are for. That's what we're here for. You don't have to live life alone." She crawled to him from inside the canoe, still holding his hand over the side. His smile faded and his eyes trembled in the exploding lights. He leaned back, breathing heavier. "No, stay away." She came closer to him. He leaned into the back of the canoe. "No, stay away. You don't know what I've done." As if reading his thoughts, "No, you don't have to go at it alone. That's what friends are for." "Jennifer, stay away, please. You don't want any part of this monster. No, I'm not a monster. I am something so much worse." She lunged her body softly into his chest and embraced her arms around him. Her chin rested on his shoulders. "Ted," she whispered. Her trembling voice spoke volumes as he felt this alien embrace him. He felt darkness all around him. Her voice, that damn trembling voice, it can't be trusted, no matter how much comfort it brought to him. The smiling face of Slithers entered his mind. She smiled at him in the darkness. It was as if Slithers lived on in Jennifer. He closed his eyes as he stifled sobs from within. He took a deep breath with her body leaned so close into his. How cruel can you be, forcing me to look back into memories that I know I can never relive? What would I give to have that again, even just one last time? I can't begin to understand what you're going through, but Ted, I want to understand it. I know you're in pain, and this life, or whatever it is, it can be hell, but it is like that for everyone. Her tears streamed down on his shoulder. I know you want to bear this alone, we all do, but we can't. We just can't. No matter how hard we try, we can't do it alone. Share the load. He felt a weight on his chest, as if his heart was in his stomach, crawling its way up through his throat, restricting the air he could let in and out. I can't, because what's on my heart, he began to whisper. I can't tell anyone. Jennifer, the less you know, the better. Then tell me what little you can. Tell me how you feel. If you can't trust any of us, trust me or trust Sam, but you can't grow unless you open up more, or at least come out more often. Ted, we consider you a friend, even if that feeling isn't mutual. I don't know what must have happened to you when you can't trust anyone. What I went through is classified, he stammered. I'm not allowed to talk about it, and this would be information that would only place you in harm's way, even if you believed it. Then tell me something about you, something I don't already know, something precious, she requested. She leaned back from him and looked him in his watery eyes. Anything. Tell me what makes you happy. If you can't manage that, tell me what makes you hurt. Just give me something. There used to be a girl. Her hair was black, and her smile lit up the sky, even when there was no sun to illuminate the darkness. She was always happy. You could say, given our circumstances, we were class sweethearts. We were even, what's the word for it, engaged. It was going to be held on Saturday. We were going to invite our little, small group of friends. What happened? She asked, gazing deeper into his eyes. He sensed that, while they were worlds apart, she understood that, but she was trying to understand him in whatever way was possible, pushing and applying pressure when needed, and releasing him just at the right moment. For her, Saturday never came. For them, they never got to see that Saturday either, he answered. I'm so sorry. She placed her hand on his shoulder and grasped it firmly to console him, as the whistling of the fireworks continued. They continued firing at a much rapid pace, the grand finale filled with innumerable explosions, filling the air with multiple different colours of exploding lights. But what bothers me the most about it is I can't talk about what happened, and that you look so much like her, it's uncanny, it's disturbing, he said, feeling he needed to desperately push her away. This was all too familiar, and it only went one place, pain, either for himself or hers. If he let her into his life, no matter how small of a part she could play to him, he would hurt her, and she would hurt him. It was only inevitable, but he also knew that if there was going to be any shot at providing peace to the turmoil in his heart, it would be through her. Well, I hope I can bring back some of her memories, if that's what will keep you grounded, she said, leaning back. Now, it is my turn. but I'll show you." She leaned back from him and pulled up the sleeve from her left arm. She showed her wrist to him. In the faint light he could see something all too familiar. Scars. There were faint flesh-white scars slitted in X's across her wrist. She smiled at him as tears escaped those slitted lids. Well-meaning, sincere, he was sure of that. What is she thinking? She's just handing me this. Jennifer, are you stupid? I could use this to harm you. You know this. But you have no reason to believe I would use this against you. Why? You know how cruel people are. Why are you trusting me, a stranger with the scars of your heart? Why are you showing me this? He asked. This is frail info. Because, my dear Tedward, she smiled and looked into his glimmering eyes. I know you don't trust me, but something tells me that you will never do anything to hurt me. He let out a sigh. Perhaps you're wrong. Perhaps you're right. The fireworks were over. Sam whistled as she saw Jennifer and Ted cozying up over in the other canoe. They immediately moved into where they were, hoping no one saw anything. But Sam saw. She saw the whole thing and left with a smile. The 6 of them returned the canoes. They all made it to the Kendal MIT train stop, outbound to Alewife. The subway was crowded, and they all huddled around in the corner of the back end of the large subway car. There was a lot of talking and commotion in the subway car from rolling bottles and cans. It filled the ears of all the listeners. Michael started engaging in a serious conversation with Ted, asking him about markets. Ted answered those questions in depth, keeping his mind busy from the demons flying around inside his head. Sam said little until they all got off on Davis Square. Jennifer and Erin lived closer to Boston, but they were spending the night with Sam, and Tim was planning on crashing at Michael's house, which was not far off from College Avenue. Ted held onto his smile, looking up at the near-empty sky, filled with little stars and that old oppressive moon beating down on him. The weight of the light was heavy as they walked up towards College Avenue. Michael and Tim waved their farewell as they took a right on Morrison Avenue. It was now just Ted, Erin, Jennifer and Sam. Of course, seeing as Ted's house was only 3 houses further down the road, they might as well have been going to the same place. Ted's fists clenched at his side, and his right hand trembled underneath the pressure he put them under. He tried to maintain that fake smile, but now he knew it became less of a mask now, as there were now 2 people who could see through it. And they knew it, and he knew it. He felt naked before them. And yet the damned majestic moon beat his spirit down as they walked down the sidewalk. Just a little further, and I can close the door behind me, he thought to himself. He kept his pace as his heart felt like it was beating through his chest. The breaths became more rapid. He resorted to breathing through his nose to limit his noise as they walked. Erin, Jennifer and Sam were caught up in some conversation that Ted tuned out. He didn't want to be bothered by anything useless. What good is it? Everything is pointless. At last he could see his beautiful, peaceful and empty house. He was close. The 3 women moved up the stoop to the apartment building. Ted waved goodbye briefly before picking up his pace. "Tedward!" Jennifer called. Damn it. "Yes?" He turned his head towards her and greeted her with his smile. "I'm sure I'll see you on Tuesday." She brushed her brown hair out of her face. "I haven't given it much thought," he answered vaguely. "Will you come?" Her smile faded into a stare much more severe. "Time will tell. It always does," he answered. "Yes or no?" she asked again. "No more dodging the question." "I don't know if I'll come or not. I'll think about it," he replied, lowering his voice as his hand began to tremble. "Don't make me text you in the dead of night again." "I wouldn't dream of it. Good night." He turned around. He started walking back down the sidewalk at a brisk pace. He could feel visions flashing before his face. The nightmares were not far behind. They never were. He could hear the opening of the apartment building behind him, and Sam, Erin and Jennifer started walking inside. Suddenly he couldn't move another step. It was not as if his legs were heavy or that he suddenly lost all energy to move. It was like his body lost the will to move. He grunted as he tried to move something, but his body did nothing. Even the willpower of Task Force 7 was not enough to move anything. He could feel his knees getting weak again. "Not here! Damn it! Not here! No, no, no!" His knees buckled, and he tumbled forward, catching himself from hitting his face on the concrete. He could feel the darkness coming in around him. The oppression from the moonlight pushed him further into the darkness and deeper into the prison inside his own mind. His whole body trembled. He gasped, breathing heavily. His eyes closed as he started choking by the pressure inside his own chest. Grief took over him again, and he couldn't hold it any more. He shrieked. His mouth opened wide as tears streamed down steadily at the side of his face. His sobs turned into agonizing screaming. Feeling the chills come over her, Jennifer's hair stood on end, and the goosebumps were raised from her arms. She turned from the door before closing it, running outside. She ran towards Ted, and she gasped, seeing him on all fours like a beast, sobbing and choking on the tears of his sadness. She sprinted over to him and tried to place her hand on his back. She tripped forward. Her hand passed through him like a ghost. She turned around immediately, catching herself. She looked Ted in the face, his eyes open but swollen with tears. He looked straight at her, but not to her, like he was in a corner, staring at a wall. His sobs, she recognized them. These were not the sobs of a man, but that of a child. I passed through him. No, I must be imagining it. She walked back over to him while he continued to sob. He didn't move at all. She went to place her hand on his back, and it passed through him again, touching the ground. She retracted her hand. Her hand trembled. She felt her heart growing heavy, and she found it hard to breathe as the air chilled her throat. She looked at her hand, and it was solid, and there wasn't anything wrong with her, but I didn't imagine it. What is going on? Is he real? She heard Erin and Sam's footsteps behind her, both wide-eyed. Tears entered her eyes as fear sunk her heart, and she clutched it. Ted? There was no answer. Ted! He continued to sob, moving from his tones to that of a child to something even younger. Ted! Sam exclaimed. What is going on? Answer me! Tedward! Jennifer cried. The wind started howling around them. Jennifer looked beyond Ted, looking down the rest of College Avenue, seeing nothing out of the ordinary, except that the road didn't end. It kept going and going and going, as if she found herself in some figment of another reality, a reality of endless despair. Ted continued to sob. There was a pool of tears below his face. Walking up briskly to Ted, Samantha placed her hand on him, only it passed through him, as if he was an empty hologram. She felt the darkness coming in, swirling around her. Her vision saw nothing but blackness, and the temperature dropped drastically, forcing her hairs on ends. She placed her hand in front of her face, and saw all 5 of her fingers bright as day, but everything else was dark. She found herself utterly alone in a black pit. Ted! Jennifer! Sam! Get up! Erin cried out. She was not about to touch Ted. She reluctantly stepped forward in the attempt to shake Jennifer and Sam up, but she couldn't touch Ted. Was he some kind of wizard? Why are they like this? Her heart thumped inside her chest, and she was flooded with a ton of thoughts that wanted to be turned into questions, for she didn't fully understand what was going on, why Ted, Sam and Jennifer seemed to freeze up, Ted first, and as Sam and Jennifer touched him, they seemed to pass through him, but merely found themselves frozen still, and in place, as if time itself was frozen still around them. She didn't understand it, and this mysticism cut something in her faith in God, for a world with magic does not exist. Erin touched Sam on the shoulder. She shook Sam out of her trance, and she was weeping. What was that? Erin looked down at Ted in his shocked state as she pulled Jennifer away from him. Jennifer was not weeping when she woke from the trance. I don't know. It was like... Sam began. Ted gasped and his weeping stopped. His arms stopped shaking as his head focused on the end of College Avenue. Ted, what is going on? Jennifer went back to him, despite the protest from Erin. Answer me! Jennifer, I don't think... Sam objected. The temperature dropped again. Jennifer, get back! Sam pulled her away from him. The 3 of them took large steps back, keeping their eyes fixed upon Ted kneeling on the ground. His hands grabbed the sidewalk, and they could see blue veins rose up over his skin. The blue veins crawled over his shoes and clothes, emitting a black light from them. Ted? Jennifer thought to herself. Ted pushed himself off the ground in a sprint, and within a singular stride he landed nearly 200 feet away. He sprinted off another stride and another until they couldn't see him anymore. There was silence in the air, and the summer heat returned. Sam and Erin started walking back into her apartment. Jennifer could hear them speaking in flustered tones, discussing specifically what it was that they saw, and the sensation of absolute darkness and the sudden chills. Jennifer couldn't hear any more of what they were saying, but she imagined their reaction would be as much the same as hers, confusion. Veins on the skin were not prominent, and she was unaware of any new scientific discoveries about an additional circulatory system. Those were veins, she recognised them, but they're not supposed to be black or changing colour, nor should they even be able to climb and crawl on the skin. She sighed heavily and clenched her fists at her side, feeling the tears stream down her face. Tedward, my Tedward, what did they do to you? Is this the source of all your pain? If it is, I don't even think I could forgive it. This is inexcusable. I'll let you go for now, but I will find you again.